everyone, this is Kelly from The Truth in Story, and I'm going to be doing sort of a series of categories. People seem to like to see how we would use particular decks versus, I'm going to do sort of my favorites or most used, but I thought I'd also do a little video kind of outlining how I would use particular decks, how I do use particular decks. And so right now, obviously you can see I have seasons set up here because I'm doing some year ahead spreads. And so I thought, since I had this deck out, which is the Wild Unknown, I would start with this sort of category of what I consider would be sort of decks that I use in ritual and or sort of with intention setting. And I've got one other deck that I'm going to pull out as well. But for the most part, when I'm setting intention, which for me tends to be in conjunction with geomancy. So you've all seen the book that I have with the sand, and I set up a geomancy figure, and then on the flap of the book, I have videos on this. I put out different cards depending on what is the intention, what I'm either putting out or trying to pull inward. I nearly always use the Wildwood Tarot. So I don't even use this deck for actual readings. I mean, I have, and I will, well, I haven't since I kind of use it this way. So for the most part, this is strictly used for me, sort of what I would consider with intention. So when I'm, again, either putting intentions out, pulling intentions out, full moon readings, new moon readings, when again, usually in conjunction with a geomancy figure or figures, I use this for setting intentions. And so that is the Wildwood Tarot. It's an amazing deck. It follows the Wheel of the Year. Last year I used it for sort of Wheel of the Year things, but it's always on sort of the space with where my bottom shelf where I set up geomancy intention settings and things of that nature as sigils. So that this is the second edition. This is my geomancy figure of the year, and then I just have listed my cards that are in conjunction with my I did a Wheel of the Year ahead instead of a year ahead. But for my year ahead or Wheel of the Year, for the most part, now there are always exceptions to every rule, right? But for the most part, I use, and that's just because it just felt like the right thing to do intuitively. But for the most part, I use the Wild Unknown for those, and I consider those intention settings, right? So for me, the Wheel of the Year and the year ahead aren't so much to do with divination or reading in terms of divination, but it's more of a look ahead of what energy should we focus on during those months. And so I also have the second edition that I have trimmed and edged. This stays in my ritual bag, so that's why I certainly had a place. I use the Wild Unknown for many different, I do readings with the Wild Unknown. Almost all of my elemental readings where I do the 2 tiers are with this, as well as the animal spirits. So I do use this for regular readings, which I don't so much for this one. However, I do use this within setting intentions. Same sort of thing. Sometimes you will use this if I'm going to be setting intentions with, say, with a geomancy figure. And so certainly these 2 decks are decks that I use that way. The one other deck that I sometimes use is the Book of Shadows Tarot. Now, I don't particularly, I have mixed feelings about this deck. I don't really use it in readings. I have one client that I do, she does a lot of work with sort of ritual and her spiritual path, and so this is one that works really well for her. So I would always keep this even just for that, because it's more of a regular client. So she's probably the only person, I think I don't know, I can't think for sure. Very few times do I actually use this for a reading, but I love the Major Arcana. In fact, it may be one that I pull the majors out and kind of make it a majors only deck for myself, simply because I love, it's got the Wheel of the Year. So I do pull these out like that Samhain. And so I will pull, there's the Wheel of the Year. I'll pull them out and set them out. So like right now, in fact, I should do it anyway. So here is Yule. There's a Yule card. So it's very, I have walkthroughs of these decks, but very often that's sort of how I use this, either for readings, again, limited mostly to certain specific client that works a lot with their spiritual path and things of that nature, and it just seems to work beautifully. Although I love the realm of fire, which has the planets as well. So I use this one more for, again, intention setting, or what people would call altar use. I kind of just have some sacred shelves, but I do have a top shelf that has to do with so look at the fire with Saturn. So there's uses like that where I'd be just setting those energies out more than anything. But yeah, this is one of those that I feel like if they just had not put these little creatures in here, and especially the earth with all the little gnomes in it, like I just don't, some of the images are really neat, and then I feel like they get spoiled by some photoshopping of just bits and pieces, that like these little gnomes everywhere, or mostly like these little air or water cells. Like if they had removed those, look at that though. Wisdom is awesome. So yeah, so this is the other one that I would say, I will set out the specific cards for the Wheel of the Year or those types of things with this deck as well. So these are probably the 3 decks that I use in terms of that type of thing where I'm setting out intentions or setting out energy of that particular thing. A newer one that would be similar to that would be which I've done walkthroughs of all of these, but this Patrick had bought me this for Christmas. I'm destroying the box. It's going to probably have to go into a bag. But this is the Arcana of Astrology, the same sort of thing, although I do quite like this also as an oracle. The little bit that I've messed with it, I have to work a little bit more. I haven't had it really long, but I like to set it out like the sun is in Capricorn, Mercury is retrograde, and tonight we had the last quarter or 4th quarter moon and in Sagittarius. So I'll set out the energy of what's going on and then do a reading underneath it. And so that's kind of the same thing where I'm sort of setting the energies that are in place versus kind of using it as a reading deck, if that makes sense. So that's this category. So the table probably is going to change because I'm going to now do some year ahead readings. But I wanted, since I had some of this out, I thought, I'm just go ahead and do that category of sort of intention setting, ritual, setting out the energy of a particular thing. Those are the decks that I generally use for that. Another category I thought of are decks that I actually use to read for myself. Oops, you know what? This is going to cause a glare. There we go. Another category of decks that I thought of would be decks that I actually use to do readings for myself, because that can be different. Now, I will use just about any deck for myself. If I have a deck out that I'm using it and I want for a client or whatever reason, or if it's a deck I'm working with or testing out, I certainly will read them use it for myself. But what are the decks that I tend to go to for myself in terms of tarot are generally the Wild Unknown. This is the 1st edition. This is the 1st edition. I don't use this for anybody but for myself. I have the 2nd edition, which I'm going to be giving to my daughter to use, and then I have the 3rd edition Mass Market. This is one I most use the most often since I've received it and trimmed it down. But I use this to read for myself. And I love this deck. I use this for clients and I use it for myself. And as you saw before, I use it in terms of ritual use, intention setting as well. So this is kind of an all-purpose deck for me. The Fountain Tarot is as well, though in 2016 I didn't use it as much. And I didn't reach for myself as much, so that's why I'm trying to just kind of, what have I been using of late. I definitely will use the Margaret Peterson for myself, because very often when I am coming to readings, it's because of terms of healing and things. And this will also go in my comfort decks. That's kind of a different category. But I do use the Margaret Peterson for myself quite a lot. I find it to be nurturing, but also empowering, but it's empowering in terms of that sort of internal healing work. And so I definitely reach for that deck in terms of readings for myself, especially this past year. Definitely the Dreams of Gaia. Now, if you followed me October, I used this all month for the month of October for Embrace the Magical, and I have done a ton of readings with this for myself and for clients. So this is, again, sort of an all-purpose deck. I use it for all occasions, but I definitely reached for this deck. It's on my table at the moment, and it's been on there since I've received it, so that always is an indicator as well. But this is definitely a deck that if I'm going to do a reading personally for myself, I reach for this deck. So I find it very much in alignment with the way I see many of the cards. I love the major arcana changes, and I just find it very empowering. I find it very reflective, just everything. It's just, to me, I get great readings from it. What else can I say? It's just, I love it. So I definitely come to, for readings for myself, I definitely will reach for that. The last month since Jen sent me this particular deck, so you'll see I have a lot of walkthroughs coming, and Jen had cleaned out her collection and sent me some decks, and this was one of them. This is the Synchro deck. I say it wrong every time, and I will be doing, I did just a quick walkthrough of this, but I'm going to be doing actually another one, because since I've used it, I just have so much more to add to it. This is sort of like, I feel like it's very simple. It's very similar in some ways to the Wild Unknown, but because it's, but even more simple and even more sort of removed. I don't think you have the cups, so you have the connection with humanity. There's no people in this. There is just such a cleanness of lines. It is fairly Rider-Waite-Smith, which generally is not strongly appealing to me, especially right now in what I'm looking for in decks. But for whatever reason, this came at a time when I was, it was going to be a rough month, and emotionally, just in terms of grieving process. And I've done a lot of readings for myself with this deck, and it has just over and over again been clear, concise, pushing when I needed pushing, nurturing when I needed nurturing, very eye-opening, not a sweet deck in terms of, like, it's very clear, very concise. I just have found this to be a deck. This is one that would also cross over into a comfort deck for me, just because of how I've used it since I've had it. And I haven't had, these I've had much longer, but I couldn't not put this in, because as of right now, when I reach for a deck reading for myself, it's probably going to be this or this, unless again I'm testing another deck out. So it's not that I never use other decks to read with for myself, because I will use anything, but these are sort of the ones when I kind of looked over my collection and thought about what are the decks that I consistently reach for to read for my own self. These are the decks that kind of popped, seemed to jump out. So again, we're talking about tarot, not oracle. So there you have it. That is kind of a section on decks, tarot decks that I use to read primarily for myself. This deck I've actually not read. I do use this one for Journey with Grief readings, so I will sometimes use this, but in very specific things. This is quite a personal deck as well. This one I don't think I've read for anybody but myself with. In fact, I pulled it over to kind of maybe use it to draw for live chat. I might have drawn a couple for live chat. I don't think so. But anyways, since I've really been working with this deck, since I got it for myself, I haven't wanted to read with for anybody else with this deck, which is not generally, I don't generally get that way about decks. But this one at the moment, I think, is right now I'm just really personally connected to it. It's just my deck. I just don't really feel the need or the desire to share it. So there we go. There's another section. The next category is what kind of started this whole thing was the idea of comfort decks. Johanna, I think it's Johanna. I've heard some people say Johanna because the H is there, but I think that might be silent, but I could be wrong. Robertson, I'll put a link to her video below. She did a video about comfort decks that a lot of people are doing. So when I was thinking about that, I was thinking of other categories as well, and it kind of expanded into what I'm doing now. But this is what kind of started it. So kind of the decks that comfort you. Now, I've already talked about these two, and these two are personal comfort decks for me. This one is new. I haven't had it for a long time, for maybe about a month, whereas the rest of them I've had for some time. And when I just think about decks, because I've literally had, like this one is the Chrysalis Tarot. I don't use this a whole lot, I'll be quite honest, but I do use it, and I do find it to be extremely nurturing. I literally had bought this deck and then had someone request a reading, and they asked me, and the day that I got this, they asked me, that they told me that they really just needed a hug, you know, that they needed sort of a mother energy kind of a reading, that's what they were looking for, is that sort of, and I knew as soon as she requested it that this was the deck for her, even though I had just gotten it, and I did a reading for her, and it was amazing and nurturing and insightful as well. And so about the only way that I have used this deck, and again, not a whole lot of times, but the times that I have used it for an area of comforting and supporting, it has come through in spades. And so even though I don't use it a lot, this isn't a deck that I would ever pass on, because the times in which I have it comes to the forefront, I always get such powerful, nurturing, supportive, but also insightful. So it's not that it's a mushy deck in any way, shape, or form. I get good solid readings for it, but there's just a healing energy about this deck that says that even though it's not one of my favorite decks, it's one I will always keep, because I've just had such amazing, comforting readings with this deck. So this is the Chrysalis Tarot. I already talked about this, but I'll just mention them again. This is the Margaret Peterson Tarot, and this just speaks to my soul. It is very healing to myself, and in Journey of Grief readings that I do for people who are grieving, it's just time and time again is strong and supportive and nurturing in a just amazingly powerful way. And it's of course also one of my absolute top decks. This, and I talked about this, I don't know, this is the Idiosyncra deck that I just talked about. I don't know that I consider this deck to be particularly comforting, but because I'm kind of mixing things. So for myself, this is a comforting deck. I don't think I would ever use this for another person for comfort. It doesn't have a comforting vibe, but it does, for me, it functions. So this is kind of the extra. These are the ones I think of as comforting. This is just comforting to me, and so that's why I've added that one in there, but I wouldn't for somebody else. It's not that, I don't know, it's between me and the deck. I don't look at these images and feel particularly comforted by the deck. It just is functioning that way for me. So that's a little bit of a side there, right? The Fountain Tarot just is amazing for this is another kind of really neutral energy deck that works in so many different ways. But because the energy is so neutral on it, it's also wonderful to use as a comforting deck, because not again that this is a soft deck, because it's not, it's actually quite a clear deck, but because of the tone of it, because of the neutral energy of it, because generally if you're comforting somebody, or if you're doing a reading that is purposes to be supportive and comforting, that means that emotions are high, right? That generally means that somebody is, emotional energy is up, anxiety might be up, circumstances and experiences at that moment might be really high energy, and that's why they're in need of support and comforting. And so having a deck that's energy is so neutral, I think is actually really functions well in those situations. So I don't think of this as a soft deck, or like this functions much more as a pure out nurturing deck. I probably wouldn't use this for just a work question, which I could with the Fountain Tarot. So it's just, you know, everybody's going to come to that separately. But for me, and I'm going to do a category of neutral decks, because I actually find neutral decks to be really important energetically, because they, again, it just kind of gets to the point, and it doesn't bring with it any added energy, amped up energy or anything. It just kind of gets in and gets things done and kind of cools the surfaces of, in terms of energetic activity. So that's why I find this to be really good to bring to those kinds of energy, because it decks, because it breathe. It brings that energy. So if somebody is already emotional, somebody is already kind of amped up anxiety wise, this functions really well to just kind of, let's get in there and talk this through and work through this. And then this is just a sweet deck. I use this primarily for children, for not children's readings. I always feel like I have to qualify that, but for birth chart readings for children. That's what I purchased it for. But it's actually, you know, kind of spoke to me and said, hello, I have something to say in readings that I would never have expected it. And it actually reads really beautiful. But again, if I was with somebody who was, you know, doing a reading for somebody who was feeling emotionally fragile, or emotionally, you know, emotions going on, and need of comfort, and in need of support, nurturing support, this is definitely, this deck came to mind. I mean, I love that the queens are the nurturers. Again, it's not a soft deck like you would think, but it does in color palette. It's sweet, and it has that sweet energy to it that I think could be very comforting as a deck. And I've actually had quite succinct readings with it for myself, and quite, you know, kind of on point. You know what? I actually have one more deck that I don't know why I don't have out here. So one second. I don't think a section on comforting decks would be complete without the Guardian Angel Tarot. As those of you know who have watched my channel for a while, I'm not really somebody into angels. It's not like I have anything against angels. I just don't really work with angel energy at all. I purchased this deck when my grandmother was ill. She passed away. She was 100 years old. You know, beautiful, long life. But it's still hard for those of us who are left behind. And this just reminds me of her. You know, she was one of those wonderful Catholic people who was so devout and so sweet and generous of spirit. You know, I just say if everybody could be like, every strong religious person could have her energy, the world would be a better place. And this deck just reflects that. Yes, it is, it's kind of just art that's been gathered. It kind of looks like vintage art. It has a very kind of shabby chic look to, you know, with the backs of that vintage and the doilies. It's just beautiful. I have such sweet readings from it. I don't think I've ever read with this for anybody except for myself, but it's just when, you know, Patrick picked this up recently after I had gotten one for his mother, and he's really liked it, which is just shocking if you just saw Patrick's collection of cards. He doesn't have a lot, and he's very specific about what he likes, and this kind of goes against all of it with all these people in it and things. But there's just something about pulling one of these cards. You don't have to think. It just has a message there, and it's just very sweet and gentle and nurturing. And although I will say, I've also gotten very pointed messages. Sorry, the decks are sliding. I also have gotten very pointed messages that were not really sugar-coated. They were just it was very direct, you know, personal, you know, for myself, have gotten just very pointed messages as well. So it's not all sugar and candy, but it is a very sweet, sweet, sweet deck, and it's certainly not a deck that I would normally use, but it's nurturing, and it's sweet, and it's loving, and it does. And again, I think any tarot deck can be nurturing and sweet and comforting. Any deck whatsoever. Well, not whatsoever. I mean, there's some with blood and, you know, vampires and people's necks being ripped out and things of that nature. So I guess there are some that wouldn't. But a standard tarot deck has that ability. These are just have that particular vibe. So there you have it. These are the kind of the decks that I would consider as comforting, and this one's simply comforting to me personally, and it's just right now what I'm using, and it's being very having a lot of comfort being given with this particular deck at the moment. I wouldn't, if you're looking for a comforting deck, I wouldn't necessarily say that's what this purpose of this type deck would be. This category is sort of what I consider neutral energy decks that I feel like don't bring any energy to the table themselves in terms of, in a good way. I don't mean that in a negative. It's not like these are energetically flat. There is just a neutral feel to them that is really great when, again, things. Now, I should have actually probably brought Shadowscape out in terms of comforting decks, because I use this a lot for myself in a healing process, but I actually don't really consider the deck itself to be particularly nurturing or soft. A lot of people, I think, mistake this for a soft deck. I don't find it to be soft. I find it to be pretty neutral energy. You've got all of the I don't know, I just find it to be really good base. It's beautiful, and it's color-wise, it's very could be conceived as being soft because it's like a little bit pastel-y, but it doesn't read that way for me. This reads as very neutral. It's great for just about any kind of situation, but especially when you just don't want to bring any extra energy into the reading. These decks, to me, work that way. Definitely the Shadowscape. I talked about a little bit before, the Fountain Tarot is a number one. These three actually are probably the strongest in that category, but this is the best. To me, this is just sort of my go-to, just neutral energy deck that just reads like a dream. This is the Line Strider Tarot. Again, a lot of what you notice, a lot of, at least with the three major ones, a lot of white space, a lot of just I don't know. And again, this is not speaking of flat line, like it has no energy to it. It's just neutral energy that just reads beautifully. I've read quite a lot with this with clients, and it just reads very clean and very neutral in a perfect way. You know, just lovely. Same thing with, this is Tarot of the Old Path. The same thing here. This is sort of a pagan-y Rider-Waite-Smith in a way. It's one of my favorite Chariot cards. When I feel like that sort of old style, like if I was going to pull a Rider-Waite-Smith, this has that sort of energy of this. The Hoods Tarot, which I had sold, that also had, but I felt like it was the same sort of energy as this one, and so I didn't really need to double up on it, but this just has that sort of clean, neutral energy that just comes in and has the conversation in a beautiful way. To me, these types of having a deck or two in this category is really important, because if energy is volatile or amped up in some way, having a neutral deck just come in and just kind of take things down a notch and just get to the information that's needed, I actually find to be really a good energy to bring to the table, especially as a professional reader. Again, I say this all the time, you don't need anything more than a single deck. But if you have a bunch of them, these are the ways in which I use the variety of decks that I have. And this too, now again, I've only read for myself with this, and I'm certainly in a honeymoon phase with this deck, but I feel like in the long run, this will function very similarly. Again, a lot of white space, not obviously with the shadowscape as much, but there's a lot of white. And it just feels quite neutral. And so yeah, which might be why it's worked really well for me in the last month. But I can feel that I won't know this one as much until the long haul. These three for sure, I'm using these consistently basis for that kind of energy. This will have to see a little bit more, but it certainly has that same energetic feel for me. So these are kind of, like I said, neutral energy decks that when you just want to get in, and kind of justice card feels like you want to cut through the emotion and just get to the situation. That's kind of what these feel like to me. Now, this next category are decks that for me, in some way or another, kind of dive deep. Now, with all of these decks, tomorrow I could think to myself, oh shoot, why didn't I put XYZ in there, right? I'm not really spending a lot of time. I'm just trying to just go instinct, pulling things off the shelf that seems right for that particular category. And so this is not exclusive. I have other decks that I can cross use and do use in the same way, but these just kind of speak to me in one way or another about decks that just kind of dig deep for one way or another. So for me, I have the Heindel Tarot. It's very interesting to work with the I Ching. I don't always agree with the reasonings behind the books with them, but by themselves I find it quite interesting to use those as well. There's just so many symbologies built into these cards. There's just such, it just hits me. This one as well as this one kind of more just sort of hit me or shortcut me into sort of an esoteric mindset. There's just something about these two in particular. We've got the added runes, Kabbalah, I Ching, correspondences. There are astrological correspondences built in. There's just a depth to this deck that feels like that sort of high priestess dive deep energy. The same thing with this one. While at a much more of a simple level, there is just something about this deck, and I haven't worked a ton with it. I generally will use it on moons, but there's just something about this deck that is high priestess energy for me. There is something here, whether it's the multiple eyes, or it's just there. I think I heard somebody explain it, or I thought of it that way. I have no clue. But there's that sense of, if this is center, it feels like this is just left of center. Like you've kind of stepped just a little bit into an alternate place, and it just has that vibe for me. This doesn't necessarily have correspondences or digging deep in the esoteric like say the Thoth or something, or the Marielle, but there is just something about this deck that shortcuts into that sort of dive deep, high priestessy level for me personally. Now some of these, might be the same for you, and some of them may not. I'm just going with my gut here. I don't think, there's no question as to why the Marielle is kind of a blend, or she talks about it being a blend, is Thoth, Rider-Waite-Smith. There's kind of a mix of the two. I find it much more Thothy, I think, than Rider-Waite-Smith, and it's doing its own thing, and it's just deep, and it's just meaty, and there's just so much. Just on a visual level, you feel like you're diving deep. On reading the guidebook and going the correspondences and the meanings and the symbols, it's going deep. It's just, for me, a very deep, dive deep kind of deck. I definitely would have to say the Thoth. I think that it's such a stunning deck. So much correspondences in color, in shape, in form, in energy, in symbols, in correspondences. There's just so much going on here that you can really just dig. You can just not. Like, you can read this just like a tarot deck, right? With some changed meanings on some of the pips and things, but you can also then just really just go, you just feel like, oh, I'm reading with a tarot deck, like when you're holding a Thoth deck, in my opinion. It just has that energy, right? Now, this is one that I haven't spent a lot of time with yet. I did it with I was going to do it with my tarot perspectives that got interrupted with my mom being sick, and so I only didn't spend a full month with it. And I want to come back to this deck because this has a very high priestess. And by high priestess, I mean the high priestess card in the major arcana. It just feels like there is depth there. There are correspondences there to dig into. It just feels like that kind of a deck. Plus, it has the most gorgeous ace cards, and I think any deck. So this is, I'm sorry, I don't even know if I've said, this is the Heindel Tarot. This is the Wooden Tarot by Skull Garden. This is Marial Tarot. This is the Thoth Tarot. This is the Tarot of the Spirit here. Then I have this, for some people this may not be, but this is the Tarot of Delphi, which is all based on old paintings that are connected with mythology and folklore. And it is that connection to myth that for me makes this a dive deep, meaty, deep deck, because it's already the traditional tarot meanings, and then diving into the story and the myths that connect with that. For me personally, because for me, story and myth is source. That is sort of the waters that spirit or divinity flows through for me, and so that makes this a particularly powerful and deep deck. So this is Tarot of Delphi. And then I really do think that Dreams of Gaia, there's a depth here that I think shouldn't be discounted. There is a thoughtfulness behind the restructuring of the major arcana that is beautiful and deep. There is a thoughtfulness about the kind of restructuring and kind of cleaning up of the suit energy, staying within their suits, and the numerological process of that particular suit, that I feel like there's so much to dive into with the Dreams of Gaia. So those are the decks that and again, I'm sure I have other ones, and again, I'll probably hit myself over the head, or somebody will say, what about this deck you have? I know you have that one. I'm sure. I'm just kind of having fun with this and pulling out what decks seem to go when I think of that particular category. This category is kind of just what I would say are just workhorse decks. Like, these are just decks that I will use on a consistent basis, just, get in there and get the work done, right? And you've seen some of these in other categories. So the Wild Unknown is definitely just one of those decks that I use for a variety of different reasons, and it's one of my go-to decks that I'm going to just pick up and use. If I'm not picking a deck for some other reason, this is just sort of a go-to workhorse deck. A Marseille deck, I love this is the Lo Scarabeo Ancient Italian Tarot Marseille deck. It's just, you know, it's still beautiful. I love the people, the way that the people look in it, other than he's kind of scary looking. I love the pips, and so that's just a really good workhorse. It shuffles beautifully. It's just a great workhorse for me for Marseille. Druidcraft is just an all-around wonderful deck. It is clear, it is concise, it is earthy. If I have a question about work, I often go to this one. It just works well for that. It feels very pentacly if I was going to label it with an elemental energy, and it's just a workhorse deck. It's just one of those decks that comes to the table consistently time and time again, and just is, it's just a work deck. These are kind of work decks for me, right? Fountain Tarot, I've already talked about this in a couple categories. That goes to show it just has this, it just works, all tarot deck works, but there's just something about, I can consistently, if I don't have some other reason why I'm picking a different deck intuitively or whatever, this is just sort of these ground zero workhorse decks that work for me over and over and over again, and that I would bring with me if I just needed some work decks, right? And the Japperdia, however you pronounce that, this one kind of surprised me because I wouldn't have guessed that with this, but this actually works beautifully just as I could have gone in some of the other categories. I love the Tides deck thing here. This other categories, this really probably could have gone in the sort of dive deep one as well. But I use this a lot. This has become quite one of my kind of go-to decks, just as a standard, get in there and do the work kind of deck. I've actually used this a lot since I've received it, and I didn't expect that whatsoever. So this would also go into those sort of unexpected decks. I knew that I would enjoy it, but I really didn't think I necessarily would use it with clients, and it reads beautifully with clients, and I just can get in there and get the readings done. And it really has come to be in the last year quite a deck that I come to quite often as just a go-to workhorse deck. So that's what I would kind of consider these, is just kind of get in there and get the work done, right? They're all beautiful. They all have their own, it's not like these are just plain decks. So I don't mean workhorse by that, but they just get in, they just consistently get the work done, and just and cross a lot of ways in which they just work for a variety of different reasons. So I definitely would consider these to be workhorse decks for me. This is a little bit of a not so much a how I use a deck category, but I still wanted to put this one in here. And yeah, it's a little bit slipshod. I didn't get everything out yet, but these are decks that surprised me in one way, and this is from the last category. This made me think of it. I knew that I would probably enjoy some of this this deck, but I had mixed feelings about it. I would see certain cards and just be like, whoa. Other cards would be like, I don't really like clowns or circus themes, and there's a lot of jesters and things in here. But this really has surprised me because, again, I use this as it just reads really beautifully, and I wasn't expecting that with this deck. I expected I would find it interesting, and I wanted to look at it and experience it, but I wasn't expecting it to become kind of a workhorse deck for me. So this definitely surprised me. Morgan Greer, I definitely got this because it was little and it was cute, and Morgan Greer images followed me around, and I loved the blue backings, and this is actually quite, especially for a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, which this is pretty much to me a Rider-Waite-Smith clone. I actually really like this little deck, and I would take this with me somewhere and use. I love the, again, the porn mustache there, but it's actually quite a nice little deck that did surprise me. That I would, I just again thought this is a little more collector-y, and I will say I haven't really used this a lot for readings. I have other decks that are small that I would go to over this one, but I have used it. I have used it for client readings, kind of add-ons to do a quick 3-card, like to expand on. Look at that funny guy. So I have used it, but I just was surprised by it. I was kind of haunted by it, and Bart kind of lured me into wanting it, but I just thought, oh, this is going to be more of a collectible thing, and I really actually like the deck. And so this one, I was surprised at how much I liked this one. We've already talked about the Guardian Angel Tarot. I knew that I would like this because, again, of my grandmother, but, you know, it just was one of those surprise decks because I do turn to it. I do pull a card from it now, and it kind of feels, I'll be honest with you, this does feel a little bit more like an oracle than a tarot deck, and these are really all tarot, but this is a tarot deck. But I have been surprised, A, by its comfortingness, B, by it actually the meanings being a lot closer, you know, working within the tarot confines as well. It's not far off from traditional meaning. It's in there. Like, you can find the actual meanings of the traditional meanings of the cards within there. And for having had some pretty succinct kind of, you know, kick in the butt kind of readings with it when I wasn't expecting it. So I definitely have to say that this was a deck that surprised me. Again, really expected to just get it nostalgia wise, and that is its primary function, but it still does surprise me. It did kind of slip under the radar. Definitely that one. This is the Hezekiah Tarot. This was gifted to me, and I would never have purchased this deck because I'd seen it before. I think Katie Flowers, I think, has done. I don't know why they're all whopper jawed, or else I've just got them now all whopper jawed. I don't know. I just expected this to be really cutesy, and it is cute. It's got little gnomes that it follows, but the measures are stunning. The minor numbered cards are cuter, and then the court cards are, you definitely feel like you're getting 3 realm of the Fae. But I've actually found it to be very succinct in reading, very clear. It has a little bit of a feeling of Druidcraft, very clear, get in there and get the work done, pentacly feeling for fairies, very pentacly feeling reading, and I actually this deck surprised me. It just surprised me. That's just the way it goes. I don't, you know, that's the category here, is decks that surprise you. And this deck has surprised me, and it's really does have sort of, again, a Druidcraft feeling where it just gets in there and it does the work. It doesn't really sugarcoat things. It says what it has to say, and I wasn't really expecting that with this. I didn't know really what to expect, but it did surprise me. It did, which is the category. I've already talked about the Animal Wisdom Tarot. Again, so I won't spend too long on it because I've already said all this. But I definitely bought this just for children's readings. And I actually have found it, again, to have quite pointed, quite kick in the butt, quite clear readings out of it that have not all been mushy or gushy. I actually have found this to be really... I don't pull it out that much, but when I do, it says what it needs to say. And I particularly love the guidebook. Each of the cards has a message from the card. Those are, I think, the jewels here. I could probably just, you know, I'm sure the rest of it's perfectly fine, but it's this messages for each of the cards where that's the gold right there. It's come through to me for me over and over again. Those little messages on each of the cards. So yeah, that was definitely a surprise one. I knew that I would like it for what I was getting it for, but I didn't think I would like it as much as I do. So yeah, that was definitely a surprise one. This is Legacy of the Divine. I'm not a big, I have, you know, I have a Lenormand, I have a Kipper, I have a Oracle of his that I really like. I went back and forth over which one of his tarot decks to get. And this one actually surprised me. It is very, again, probably a little druid crafty. It has very powerful. I've also gotten really poignant. I find it to be really great with dream work for some reason. I don't know why. I think because I had a good experience working through a dream with it, so now I kind of think to go to it maybe for dreams. But it's actually a really strong deck. It just, it reads really strong. I definitely find that men seem to respond to it, and it's not a masculine or a feminine deck, but it's kind of, I don't know. This could go into sort of that neutral category, but it's very powerful and it reads really clearly, and I wasn't expecting to pull it out as often as I do. Again, it's not one of my primary decks, but I do like it for 3 voices readings with the Gilded Reverie and the, oh, I can't remember the name of the Oracle deck. I can see the box there, but not enough to be able to read it. Anyways, there's his Oracle deck. That makes a really strong 3 voices reading. So I really did not expect to find this to be as strong of a reader as it actually has been. And then the newest one that surprised me is the Mythic Tarot. This is the first edition that Etsy found me for $15. But even in the second edition, I really was just curious. Stephen had put up a comparison of this and this, all the different versions that he had. And I thought, I had a coupon, and I had a good coupon at, like, I think it was Black Friday. So I just picked up the second edition at Barnes & Noble's, and I really do, I think I said actually, but I really love this. That's not too surprising because I love mythology, but I just really love the way that this reads. I'm looking forward to working with this more, but I just really love the way this reads, and I knew that I would find it of interest, but I truly was getting it just for the fact of interest. I didn't think I would actually be really loving the way that it reads, so that was definitely a surprise. And then one more surprised one, which is right on my desk, is definitely would have to be Dreams of Gaia. Now, I had her Messenger Oracle, so I knew that I liked her work, but I wasn't really intending to get this deck, to be honest. I thought it looked interesting, but I don't know. I was back and forth about it. I was on the fence, and I literally got it because a couple people had said things that piqued my interest, and to be honest, and I said this in the walkthrough, I got this more because I saw her interactions, the artist Raven Phelan. I saw her interactions, and I'd never seen her interacting with anybody before. Again, I had her Messenger Oracle, but she wasn't somebody that I followed necessarily or knew that she was active on the internet or anything. But I started because they had a problem with productions and things like that. She was, kind of having to get out there and PR the problems and answer questions and things, and I just loved her energy and how she was dealing with the situations, and that's why I got the deck. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to check this out, and I literally said that to myself. I'm just going to check it out. It's not that expensive of a deck, and it's new. I'm pretty sure I can trade this after. I just wanted to look at it. I was curious, and I was curious based a lot on her energy, and I thought, I'll get it and, walk through it and kind of, get to experience the deck, and then I can just always pass it forward. Like that's really the way I walked into this deck. Blown away. As soon as I got it, sitting on my bed with it, sending lots of pictures to Patrick, and I was just blown away by the system, and this was completely unexpected how much I just into this particular deck. So that's definitely would have to be unexpected, right? These just performed, and then this one. See, I have a lot of them. Look at all these. And most of these, I bought this one, I bought this one, I bought this one. I bought the Mythic Tarot, the new Mythic Tarot. I bought this one, I bought this one. So actually, surprisingly, not, you know, they weren't all ones that just came, because I do have other decks that I would never have bought and ended up liking, but these are ones that literally just, they kind of surprised me. Same thing with this one. I would never have probably bought this deck. In fact, I know I wouldn't have bought this deck, and it surprised me for sure. That's one of my favorite Fools. So this one, yeah, I would qualify this, but I didn't have any expectations on this because I hadn't really seen it at all. Whereas this I had seen, all of these I'd seen around, so I had some expectations, and I was blown away by these. Just changed. These just didn't. They surprised me, which is the title of the category. Stop Rambling, Kelly. This category would be decks that I find to be particularly empowering in some way. And again, you're going to see a lot of crossover. You know, Dreams of Gaia. I just feel like this definitely comes from the seat of self. Your choices, the whole, you know, the key main card is the idea of choice, that we have choices. The choices and decisions impact our lives, choices and decisions of other people, but it's definitely comes from a place of personal responsibility and personal power. I don't think there's any question about that, and so I definitely have to have that one in there. I, no question, have to have Tarot of the Hidden Realms. For me, this deck, I talk about all the time, this deck challenges over and over again myself and people I read for. It just challenges you to come back to the seat of your power. I don't know why. This isn't a personal empowerment deck. It's a Fae deck, right? But for me, this just reads very empowering. This could be just me, and you could have a completely different experience with this deck. But this deck, to me, it's in the looking out of the cards. It's in the close-up. It's in the eyes looking at you very often. It's in the strength of the body positions and the postures, the magic. She's just calling up magic. I especially think of just all of them. They're just so beautiful. The body postures connected to the earth here. The strength card. I'm trying to show the moon card. Just really just embodies how this deck feels to me. Like, get in, get your fingers into the earth. It's Tarot of the Hidden Realms. It's under the earth. It's in the realm of the Fae. It just, for me, is extremely empowering deck. Again, that could just be me. All of these categories are going to shift and change depending on who's doing them, right? But for me, this is extremely empowering. It brings you to the seat of your power. It invites you and it challenges you to come from a place of strength. That's how I come with that one. This one is also the Margaret Peterson, which I've talked about as a comforting deck. It does also, it's also very strong, and it also does, again, come from the seat of self. So there is, again, for me, that is a sense of empowerment of where are we at? What is the work that we need to do internally to bring us to our most confident, our most fulfilled, our most empowered self? And so that's kind of what I'm talking about with these categories. And I definitely feel like the Margaret Peterson, I love the Pentacles. I think that the Six of Pentacles, which I've shown many times, I think really represents that in this deck, where it's saying, are you taking in the energy from your feet that you need? I love all the feet in the Pentacles. It's probably my favorite deck, Pentacle-y wise. That's not a suit that's normally one of my favorites, but in this deck, I just love it. Of course, you know how it is when you're trying. Anyway, it's got footprints where it's like pulling in the energy from the earth and then pushing it out again with your hands and making sure that that is in balance and it's coming from a place of strength. I just feel like that card is one of my favorites in the deck. But of course, I'm sure I've already passed this one. It just, for whatever reason, that card just speaks to me of balance and integrity of it, and personal empowerment, which is kind of the category. I'm babbling. I definitely am going to have to wrap this up probably, because I could go on and on making different categories. But Tarot of the She as well. This is one of those I don't use a whole lot, but definitely, in my opinion, this has to do with empowerment of self, really digging deep. This really probably should have gone into the dive deep one as well, but it's diving deep in a very personal power, empowering way. Very confronts you and challenges you. Like both of these Fae decks, I think really challenge you to look deep and to really come from a place of personal power. So that's definitely been an experience with Tarot of the She as well. And then this is a new one for me, and I haven't gotten a lot of work done on it yet. I traded this. I think these are in order, and I don't want to mess them up because I still need to do a walkthrough. Did I put it in order? Maybe not. Those are extra world cards. No, I didn't. Or I did, but then I decided to read with it. So do a reading with it. And I've read with this for clients already. But this has that same energy. I feel like this really expresses it because it's the Five of Swords. So you see the conflict, but it also tells you the path out of the Five of Swords. The other one that's a good example of that, and again, I haven't worked with this enough to go into, you know, really big detail. So I'm kind of reserving that, but just a little bit that, look at that one. And truthfully, this is not one I probably would have purchased, but, you know, in a trade, I was like, oh, I'll trade it because I'm interested, right? And it's actually surprised me. This could have been a surprise one as well, but I just haven't worked with it enough. But I just want to show you the other example. And these aren't the only examples of this, but I just are the ones that come right to mind before I've done a lot of work with it. Let me find it. Here, this one. So the Eight of Swords is another one I think that really, it talks about the card. So you have the sense of being constrained, but you also have the way out. Like he's using the swords using his mind, using his intellect to both set where he can step on them and push himself up and be able to grab hold of and pull himself out. So it's both, it reflects the card, but it reflects the way forward as well. So I don't know, there's something about this deck that feels very much, again, that sort of place of personal power, really tapping into your empowering yourself in some way, shape, or form. So, again, haven't worked with this enough to really be able to say it as much as the other ones, but I've just got that sense when I was thinking of this category, this one definitely came to mind. So that's kind of how I'm trying to do things, just kind of roll with what comes to mind. So there you go. This category is, I'm just going to wrap things up now, so I thought I'd kind of end it on a more, I don't know, superficial note. It's like decks that's just, these are decks that really just wowed me visually. This, and of course, I'm sorry, Baba Studios, you know, they wow you. So this is a Bohemian Gothic. This was probably one of my favorite walkthroughs because Miss Boho had gifted me this. I didn't know what was coming. I love Gothicness, but it's just beautiful. It makes me laugh. This really should go into the kind of a workhorse, although I don't use it a lot. I use it for myself for a lot of moon energy. So I do use it, and it's not like, it's not a creepy deck. He's my BFF now. I find it to be very nurturing. I find it to be very clear, and it makes me smile. Like, this is my embrace the magical kind of deck. This is, you know, that kind of deck that it just makes me smile. To even just look at the box, you know, see the box on my shelf makes me smile. It just taps into something Just beautiful. And the backs are one of my favorite, you know, it's just beautiful. The production, I guess that's maybe, although that could be said of the Fountain Tarot as well as the Wild Unknown. I'm sure there's other ones, but the production of a Baba Studio deck, it is, you know, it is part of that. This is Tarot Prague, which was actually, I forgot about this one. This was actually, I thought, this is the Tarot of Prague, and this was actually sent back with a friend of mine who bought from Karen. She had seen my review of the Bohemian Gothic Tarot, and she sent me this one. This is another one of those that's just, it just feels like, you know, oh, I'm a tarot reader with this one, right? It's just, I do use this for readings for clients. Again, if I want that sort of old feel, Rider-Waite-Smith, I wouldn't go to the Rider-Waite-Smith. This is what I would go to, because it feels beautiful in the hand. It looks beautiful. It has the gilding on the cards. The backs are just stunning. Like, it's the production of it, the feel of shuffling it. It's just that sort of luxury. It's just that wow factor, right? This is the wow factor category. And then this is the Romantic Tarot. Again, it's just beautiful, right? It's just a beautiful, beautiful deck. This could also go into the surprise ones. I wouldn't have known how much I would love this. And I don't use it for, I do think of this, I will say, because it's Victorian Romantic, I do think of it, it's really a period more than it is, you know, romance. But I do think of it with relationships. But this one, it has some of my, it's just beautiful. I love that 3 of air there. I love the 10 of Wands in this deck. I love the, is it the 8 of Swords? There's something, I love that. Is just gorgeous. Look at that 2 of air. So it's just beautiful. It's just, and in this, I had to say this just in term, or have this category just in terms of shuffling. There is no deck that I love to shuffle more than the Victorian Romantic. And again, these are not easy to get decks, I believe. I have no clue if that's sold out at this point. Although I will say Bart recently found, I think, a 1st edition or 2nd edition. I don't know what edition of the Bohemian Gothic for really cheap. So you can find these decks that are more expensive and harder to find with some patience and really watching and looking at trade forums and things. Like, you can get these for not an arm and a leg. It just takes some patience and some luck, a little bit of luck. But just in terms of shuffling, to me, there is absolutely nothing like the experience of shuffling the Victorian Romantic. It's just beautiful. I love it. And then recently, I'm just putting, this is so different than these 3, right? But this is a deck that is, for the first time in a long time, it just wowed me. And it's very different. It's black and white. It's just it's the line art, right? This deck just blew me away visually, energetically. It wowed me. I haven't, just been kind of whoa over a deck as much as this one in a while. Again, I have all of my decks are beautiful in one way or another, so I'm not, this isn't really, I don't know, this is what category this is. This is just that for whatever reason they visually just kind of, this one just speaks to my soul, speaks to my inner child, speaks to my inner fortune tellery person. And same thing with this. This just feels like luxury, and it just makes me feel like, I'm in Italy or France or somewhere, or Prague, doing readings with it's just so beautiful. This one is just pure shuffling and visual, and this one, just for whatever reason, it's so different, but it just wowed me. And it reads gorgeous as well. So I guess that's sort of the wowed me category there, just to kind of wrap things up on a little bit of a superficial nature, although all of these read really beautifully as well. But definitely there is a superficial wow factor to these decks as well, for me personally. Again, everybody's gonna have different ones that do that. So there you have it. This has just been a walk through my, I just didn't want to do, oh, here's all my decks, or I am going to do my top decks, Oracle, Tarot, and Lenormand, like top 2016 decks. But I just wanted to do something a little bit different, and I was inspired by Johanna's comfort decks, that idea of, okay, well, how do you have all these decks? Well, how do you use them? And that's kind of what inspired me. That booklet never wants to quite get in there right. You know, how do you use, what ways do these decks work for you in different ways? I thought might be interesting. So I hope that you found this interesting, and have a wonderful day.